I had studied psychology and worked as a counsellor before, so I wanted a job in that field, but finding one wasn't easy. The best job I could get quickly was as a paraprofessional in the special education department at an elementary school in a nearby suburb. The job was only available at that time because they needed someone to stay in the computer room while the kids did speech therapy on Zoom. My job was simple. I went from classroom to classroom picking up students for their sessions. I took them to the Zoom room, made sure they logged in, and then sat with them for 30 minutes to an hour. Afterwards, I walked them back to class and went to get the next student. Let's just say I was overqualified for the job. Some days were busy with a full schedule. Other days I had only 2 appointments. The school was huge, shaped like a horseshoe, with about 700 elementary students. My room was all the way in the back on one side, in the pre-K section. Walking across the school and back took about 15 minutes when I had to pick up kids from the older grades. I did that walk every day, passing the same hallways, the same classrooms. In the middle of the school, near the front office, there was a display case. Inside it sat a rag doll with construction paper covering its face. I noticed it every time I passed by. Always tried to ignore it. It wasn't exactly creepy, but it felt out of place, like it didn't belong there. Nothing else was in the case. No signs, no decorations, no explanations. Just that one strange doll knitting alone. It never moved, never changed, and it stayed that way for the entire 5 months I worked there. Now, strange things started happening in the computer room where I worked. The doors in the school needed a key to lock from both the inside and outside. They didn't lock on their own. You had to use a key every time. The rule was to lock empty rooms during the day, but no one really followed it because we were always going in and out. Since I had to leave often to pick up kids, I just left my door unlocked. It made things easier. I didn't worry much. No one else ever used that room except for speech therapy. But weird things started happening. I'd go to pick up a pre-K kid just 2 classrooms away. It took less than a minute, but when I came back, my door would be locked. Sometimes I was gone longer. Sometimes it happened in just 60 seconds. In my free time, I tried to figure out how the door kept locking. I tested it over and over. There was no way it could lock by itself. The only answer I could think of was that someone was locking it on purpose while I was away. I asked the janitor. He was always around. He shook his head. No, he said. And when I asked if the door could lock by itself, he gave me a straight answer. Definitely not. That's when I started to think maybe someone was messing with me, trying to teach me a lesson for leaving it unlocked. But instead of saying anything, they were doing it in a passive-aggressive way. If that was the case, I wasn't going to ignore it. I texted my boss, the vice principal, and asked her to come talk to me. When she arrived, I explained everything, how the door kept locking, how it only happened when I was gone, and how there was no way it could be happening on its own. She told me she didn't think anyone would do that on purpose. Said she'd have maintenance check the door. That was at the end of the conversation. After the weekend I came back. The door was broken. It was off its hinges, slightly tilted, and wouldn't close properly anymore. No matter how hard I tried, it wouldn't fully shut. Well, I guess locking by itself wouldn't be a problem anymore. The school had security cameras in the hallways. I wondered if they had footage of me checking the door before leaving, making sure it was unlocked, and then returning to find it locked again. Then one day I went to pick up a kid from the pre-K wing near my office, but the room was empty. The schedule had changed and the class wasn't there. I didn't think much of it. I just went to get the other kid who also had a session at that time. As we walked back, I noticed another paraprofessional nearby. She was in the playroom watching her group of kids. Since she worked in the same area, I asked if she knew where the missing class had gone. She said she wasn't sure, but thought she saw a kid run into that classroom. Maybe they're using the bathroom, she said. I nodded and went to check. The classroom was still empty. There was a bathroom in the back, but the door was open. I walked over feeling a little confused and peeked inside. No one was there. I shrugged at the little kid with me. Maybe the other one had already left. As I turned to walk out, bang! The bathroom door slammed shut behind me. The little boy jumped, his whole body tensing up. My heart raced, but I tried to stay calm. The other paraprofessional noticed us standing there staring into the empty room. She walked over and asked, "Was the kid in there?" I hesitated. "No," I said, but the bathroom door slammed shut behind me as I was walking out. I looked down at the kid with me. He was staring up at me, eyes wide. "Probably just the wind," I said, trying to sound casual. She gave me a strange look, like she thought I was imagining things, but she didn't say much, just shrugged and walked away. The little boy whispered it was a ghost. I shook my head quickly. No. I'm sure it was just because I touched the door, I said, using that calm adult voice we all use to make kids feel safe. But he didn't look convinced, and honestly, neither was I. A few weeks passed. One afternoon I was alone in the computer room decorating the walls with artwork. It was a quiet day. Pre-K had gone home early. The teachers were all in a staff meeting. The halls were silent. I was cutting and taping decorations focused on my work. Then, someone tapped on the door. The door didn't close all the way anymore, so I figured maybe someone didn't want to just push it open. I stood up and opened it. No one was there. I leaned out, looked both ways. The hallway was empty. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. I went back inside, sat down. Maybe I had imagined it. Then another knock. This time I stood up fast, ready to catch whoever was messing with me. But again, no one. I don't have any special abilities. I don't talk to ghosts. That's never been my thing. Still, I was curious. So I asked the janitor, "Is this place haunted?" He didn't even hesitate. "Yeah," he said. "They say a little boy passed away here. They named the doll across from the office after him." I couldn't believe it. So I went to my supervisor and asked her. She nodded. "Oh yeah. They told you about Rodney, huh?" "Yeah." Well, that's something they could have mentioned in the job posting. By then I had gotten to know the librarian. I asked her too. She said lots of people had strange experiences over the years. Night janitors saw things move. Chairs shifting, doors opening, supplies ending up in different places. One night, at 3:00 a.m., the head principal got an alarm alert. The system showed someone was in the basement, but no outside doors had opened. The security cameras showed no one inside. And during spring break, the doll across from the office was ripped apart inside its case. Its head was found on the ground. There was no footage. No one had gone near it. The cameras showed nothing. One staff member said she never believed in ghosts until she saw a little boy run into a classroom. She followed him inside. The room was empty. I never saw anything like that, but the things I did see were enough. Some staff knew about the ghost, others hadn't heard a thing. But most of the people who had strange experiences worked on my side of the building. The other side, completely normal. It felt like a different world. One day during a meeting, I spoke to a paraprofessional from another school in the district. She mentioned that she had attended the same elementary school. I asked if she had ever heard about the ghost. She shook her head, but then paused. "I don't know about a ghost," she said, "but when I was a student there, a boy passed away. He got really sick with the flu. His heart couldn't take it. She told me the school had put up a drawing in the hallway to remember him." I went to look. Among all the plaques and pictures, there was one that stood out, a drawing of a peaceful swimming hole. with a mountain in the background. It was dedicated to a boy named Ernie, not Rodney. That made me wonder, was the doll's name a mistake? Had the story just gotten twisted over time? Either way, the ghost stories felt more real. By the time summer came, I had found a better job and moved on, but the experiences I had there stayed with me. Even now, I still think about that hallway, that doll, and the name written on that plaque. On my last week, I sat in the quiet computer room and spoke to Ernie. I told him that if he wanted, he could move on. He didn't have to stay. I told him about a special place I knew, a peaceful spot in the countryside where I believe the spirit world feels closer, and I said he was welcome to come with me if he wanted. I don't know if he did, but on my last day I drove out to that place. I brought a small birdhouse and set it down for him. I don't know if he's still at the school, or if he found a new place to be, but wherever he is, I hope he's at peace. I went to Usaid National Park with my friend Christine, her family, and 2 other families during last spring break. There were kids around our age between 15 and 17, but the parents didn't really plan anything fun. They mostly just sat around and talked, which got boring for us. Since we wanted to do something exciting, we decided to look for big rocks to climb. 2 brothers in our group were really into rock climbing, and they even brought special gear for free climbing. Even though they acted like they knew what they were doing, it was pretty clear they weren't very good at it. Still, they were excited to try. So we all joined in. We followed a trail, and on the right side we saw a pile of big rocks. There were 7 of us, but I forgot to mention that earlier. We walked over to the rocks and started climbing. The ground was a little wet, so most of us were careful, but the 2 brothers didn't seem to mind at all. After about 20 minutes of moving from one rock to another, we reached a huge mountain. I wasn't sure which one it was, but I knew it wasn't El Capitan and it wasn't Half Dome either. Then we noticed a ledge that looked easy to climb. 4 of us decided to go up. It was about 20 feet high and we made it to the top without much trouble. After looking around for a bit, we climbed back down. The wall seemed to go on forever, so we kept walking along it, wondering where it would lead. After a while, we came across a small hill in our path. We climbed over it, and as we reached the top, I turned around. That's when I saw it, a half dome rising in the distance. The giant rock stood tall against the sky, and the sunlight made it glow. It looked beautiful. I stopped for a moment just to take it all in. I could see the treetops stretching far into the horizon, and it felt amazing. For the next 2 days, we went back to the same spot about 2 hours each day. That wall became our favourite place to hang out. It was quiet. No parents, no trails, no other people. Just us. And a few squirrels running around. As we started climbing down from the ledge one evening, we suddenly heard someone calling Christine's name. We assumed it was her dad since we had told the parents about the wall. Without thinking much of it, we shouted back, "We're coming," and headed in the direction of the voice. But when we got there, no one was around. The area was empty. Just trees, rocks, and the fading light of evening. We stood there for a moment. Maybe her dad had turned back toward the campsite after hearing us reply. That made sense. So we shrugged it off and continued walking back, looking forward to dinner. When we got back to the campsite, all the parents were still sitting around talking. We didn't mention hearing Christine's name. We still thought it was just her dad calling. The next day we went back to the wall again. We reached the big rocks we had to climb over when Jared, the oldest in our group, suddenly said, "Guys, keep looking forward." Christine laughed. "Do you see a bear?" Jared didn't laugh. He just looked at her and asked, "How far are we from the trail?" Christine thought for a moment. "Maybe 100 yards. Now, any experienced hiker knows it's not safe to go that far off the trail, but we'd been doing it every day without thinking. It had never seemed like a big deal. Nothing had happened before. So we never felt like we were doing anything wrong. Jared suddenly stopped and told everyone to stay close. That's when I knew something was off. Then about 50 feet away I saw him, a man, standing among the trees. He was thin with a scruffy beard and long messy dreadlocks. He wore a flannel shirt and held a flashlight even though it was daytime. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring straight at us. A wave of fear hit all of us at the same time. Without saying a word, we turned and climbed down as fast as we could, our hands and feet slipping on the damp rocks. We just wanted to get away. Then when we were about halfway down, we heard it again. Christine. The voice, slow, almost dragging out her name. None of us stopped to look back. We just kept moving. That's when we rushed down the rocks as fast as we could and ran straight back to the campsite, out of breath, scared. We told the parents everything. They took us seriously. The next day, we moved to a different campsite. We also reported it to the park rangers and gave them a description of the man. But after checking around the area, they couldn't find anyone who matched what we saw. In 2019, I moved to Lawrence, Kansas. At the time, I was around 20. I had just dropped out of college halfway through because I couldn't afford it anymore. I didn't want to move back to my parents' house, so I started looking for a small, cheap apartment where I could stay alone and work. Most places were expensive, especially for someone like me working part-time at a local bookstore. Then one evening I checked Craigslist. There was one listing that caught my eye. The owner sounded old but friendly. His name was Walter. He asked if I could come see the place the next morning. The apartment was behind a small thrift store on a quiet street. The building was old, maybe built in the 60s. It had 2 apartments upstairs and one small unit on the ground floor. That was the one he was renting. Walter was around 55 or 60. A thin man, pale face, grey hair, not very well kept, but he was polite, soft-spoken, and didn't ask me too many questions. He told me the last tenant had left suddenly a few weeks ago but hadn't caused any problems. The place was small, one room with a tiny kitchen attached, a bathroom, thick walls, small windows. The rent was low, and honestly, it was all I could afford at the time. So without thinking much, I said yes. I moved in 2 days later with 2 bags and a second-hand mattress. The first week went by normally. I was working evening shifts at the bookstore, coming home late, eating something simple and going straight to bed. The street was always quiet. I didn't see many people around. The place felt peaceful, but soon I started noticing small things. There was a door in the corner of my kitchen. It looked like a normal storage room door, but when I opened it once, I saw narrow wooden stairs going down into the dark. Walter hadn't mentioned it when I visited. Old buildings always have basements, so I figured it was just for storage. I closed the door and didn't think about it again. It was around the second week when I started hearing sounds at night. Nothing loud or scary, just small thuds or faint creaks in the floor coming from the kitchen side. At first I thought maybe I was imagining it, or maybe the sound came from outside, but it happened more than once. Then I told myself, maybe it's rats, or just old building noises. But deep down, something fell off. I didn't want to go down there, but at the same time, I didn't like not knowing what was underneath me. That feeling stayed with me for days. Then one evening I stood in the kitchen, staring at that basement door, the one I had ignored for so long, but now couldn't avoid any more. I needed to see what was down there. I needed to know. So I grabbed my phone for light and slowly turned the handle. The door opened with a faint sound. I stood there for a long moment, listening hard, but there was nothing, just silence. So I placed my foot on the first step and slowly began walking down. At first it looked like no one had touched this place in years. Dust was everywhere. The space was small and closed off. But then I saw something that didn't fit. On the far wall, cleaner than the rest, was a large wooden board, and when my light hit it properly, I froze. It was a map, a hand-drawn map of my apartment. It didn't have any words or notes, just lines drawn in black marker, the shape of the walls, the position of the doors, the windows, even small things like my bed, my shelf near the window, my chair by the kitchen. It wasn't messy, it wasn't rushed, it was detailed, too detailed. I turned my light around the basement again, now seeing things I hadn't noticed before. Small footprints in the dust, not many, but fresh enough. The marks of someone walking here. Carefully, I turned and climbed the stairs faster than I thought I could. I locked the door behind me and pushed a chair in front of it. Then I stood there for a while, just staring at that door. That night I didn't sleep, but it wasn't just fear, it was the thought that someone had been watching me. The next morning I didn't go to work. I didn't feel safe anymore. I didn't care if I sounded crazy. I decided to call the police. But before I did that, I packed my important things and left the apartment. Then I sat in a small coffee shop down the street and called the non-emergency number. They sent 2 officers within the hour. I met them outside the building and one of them asked me to explain everything. One officer stayed with me while the other went down into the basement. After about 10 minutes, he came back up. His face was serious. He asked me to wait outside. Later, one of them explained what they found. The map wasn't the only thing down there. Behind some old crates, they found a small bag. Inside were items that didn't belong to me. An old phone, keys, a woman's scarf, and small personal things, like a bracelet. It looked like someone had been watching previous tenants, maybe even entering the apartment when people weren't home. They didn't know how long this had been going on. There was a narrow section in the basement wall that had been broken through a small gap, leading to the crawl space under the building. From there it would be easy for someone to reach the back of the apartments without ever being seen. They didn't find anyone down there, but they told me not to stay in the apartment. They said they would contact the property owner, Walter, and begin an investigation. I stayed at a friend's place in the next town for a few days. Later, I went back during the day with a police officer just to collect the rest of my things. Walter never contacted me. A few weeks later, I heard from someone in town that the apartment was now empty. The coffee shop owner told me the police had been coming around for days after that. Nobody said exactly what happened, but I didn't care. I moved to a new city and rented a small apartment in a newer building with good security. In 2018, I was living in a small town called Milton, Oregon. Maybe you've never heard of it, most people haven't. I had moved there because I needed peace. Back then I was around 26, fresh out of a hard year. I rented a tiny apartment above a bakery and life was simple. But I had one problem. I didn't have a car. And Milton wasn't the kind of place where you could just walk everywhere. Shops were far apart and the buses only came twice a day. I needed something with wheels, anything affordable. So one evening I sat by my window and searched Craigslist on my phone. Many ads appeared, but one caught my attention. Old car for sale, runs well, take care of her. The photo showed a blue car with faded paint standing alone in a yard. I called the number listed and the man answered. He confirmed the car still worked and gave me his address. The next evening I went to see it. The inside was clean and smelled like old storage or like books that had been left unused for years. Then he handed me the keys and told me, take care of the car. I gave him the money and I left. For the next few days everything was normal. Nothing strange happened. The heater worked, the brakes were fine, the engine sounded good. After moving to a new place and worrying about expenses, the car felt like one less problem to deal with. But that didn't last long. One night after my shift at the hardware store, I sat in the car and noticed the GPS screen was already on with a route set. The destination read warehouse. A straight line heading out of town, about 20 miles away. I pressed the clear button without thinking much of it. Maybe it was just something left by the previous owner. But the next evening, the same thing happened, the same route, the same warehouse. The GPS wasn't connected to my phone. There was no saved address. No recent search, yet the route appeared again. And then it started happening every time I got in the car. After a few days it got worse. The GPS began rerouting me in real time. No matter where I was going, it would recalculate the path toward the warehouse. If I drove to the grocery store, it told me to go farther. If I went to the library, it gave me a longer way back, passing near the same old highway every time. It felt like the car was trying to lead me somewhere. I opened the map on my phone to check the location. The warehouse was far past the edge of town, beyond the last gas station, close to the woods. Then one weekend I stopped at a local grocery store near my apartment. It was nearly empty, just the man who worked there. While paying, I asked him about the warehouse. He looked at the map for longer than I expected. Then he said it was an old place, no longer in use. He mentioned a man named Tom who used to live nearby. Tom drove a blue car and went to that warehouse almost every day. Then one day, he stopped, and nobody seemed to know why. I left without asking anything more, but things got worse. The GPS no longer waited for me to start the car. Some mornings the screen was already on with the same route. Warehouse, Highway 12, 20 miles out of town. Even after unplugging it, the screen turned on by itself. I started driving less. I stayed home more. But the feeling stayed. Every time I looked out my window, the car was there, waiting. Then one evening I found an envelope at my door. Inside was a photo. A picture of my car parked outside, taken from behind. I hadn't heard anything that night, but I couldn't sleep, and by morning I had made a decision. I had to end this. I got in the car and drove. I didn't need the GPS, because I already knew the way. Highway 12 was narrow and quiet with trees on both sides, no signs, no other cars. After 20 miles I saw it, the warehouse, an old grey building, standing alone. The GPS screen had gone dark, like its job was done. I stayed in the driver's seat for a while, long enough to feel how empty the place really was. Then I stepped out. The ground was dry. There were old tyre marks in the dirt, but none of them looked fresh. A metal door on the side was slightly open. Not wide, just enough. There was no clear reason to go inside, but it felt worse to leave without looking. Then I saw him. In the corner of the warehouse a man was standing. It was the same man who sold me the car on Craigslist, the same old man from that house. He was watching me. He didn't move. He didn't speak. For a moment I didn't understand what was really going on, but then I realized he had been following me since the first day. He had planned this. From the beginning. The GPS was never broken. It wasn't a glitch. He had set it up. He had been controlling it all along. Every route. Every direction. Every time it pointed me to the warehouse, it was him. I felt trapped. He started walking toward me. His face was empty. No fear, no anger, no smile, just quiet and calm, like he had done this before. I didn't want to find out what would happen next. I ran out of there and drove straight back to my apartment, but something didn't feel right. The man didn't stop me at the warehouse. He didn't try to chase me. He didn't care if I saw it. Sitting in the car, I noticed a small black dot on the rearview mirror. It was a hidden camera. I checked the car and found more. Under the dashboard, near the back seat, by the radio, tiny cameras, microphones. He had been recording me since day one, watching everywhere I went, listening to everything I said. The warehouse was just a distraction. The real trap was the car, and now he probably knew that I knew. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the man, about how easy it had been for him to choose me. I never saw him again. He didn't come back. The next day I got rid of the car. I didn't sell it. I didn't want anyone else to go through what I did. I paid a mechanic to take it apart completely. Every wire, every camera, gone. But even now, when I walk home at night, I can't help but feel like someone's still watching. I don't really believe in ghosts or anything paranormal, but I do enjoy thinking about these kinds of stories. They're fun, and what happened to me feels like one of those strange stories people tell. Anyway, this happened when I was in high school in Northern California. My best friend was having a family reunion, and I was invited too. Around 9 to 12 p.m, the last family members arrived, but for some reason, they didn't bring their daughter with them. I still don't know why they left her behind, but they asked us to go and pick her up. Tishan had just gotten his first car, and when you have your own car for the first time, every little thing feels like a good reason to go for a drive. The girl's house was about 2.5 hours away, but they gave us money for gas, so we didn't think twice. We got into the car and started driving. We played music, had some snacks, and were just having a good time like any normal road trip. After a long drive on the highway, we finally took the exit. Soon we found ourselves in a small, quiet town, surrounded by trees. Eventually the radio started to cut out a little, so I turned it down. No point in just listening to static. This little dirt road just kept going. On and on, to the point of absurdity. Tishan and I started joking. Who in the world would come out this far? Just to build a house then. And this will stick with me for the rest of my life. This overpowering smell came into the car. It smelled like copper, so strong it was almost hard to breathe. Both of us felt sick, like we were going to throw up. My stomach twisted from how bad it was. The smell was so thick, it felt like you could almost touch it. But we kept driving. After a while we reached a small wooden bridge, maybe 20 feet long. As we crossed it, the bad smell slowly went away. The radio started working again. Finally, we reached an open space with about 5 houses. As soon as we saw them, we started laughing. It felt so strange driving that far, just to find a few tiny homes. Not only did someone build a house way out there, they built 5 houses, right in the middle of the woods. We kept asking ourselves, why would anyone do that? We picked up his cousin Shay. Yes, that's really her name. As soon as she got in the car, I asked her about that strange smell, but she just looked confused. She said she'd never smelled anything like that before. Shay was about the same age as us, and we all liked the same kind of music. After a while, one of her favourite songs came on. She asked us to turn it up, and we did. Now it was almost midnight, and we were blasting music driving back down that absurdly long road. As expected, the radio started cutting out again, bit by bit, and then the smell hit us again, not gradually. It was like slamming into a wall made of pennies. I immediately turned to Shay and asked again. This time, she was absolutely disgusted, and she swore this was not normal. But while she was still talking, we reached that small wooden bridge again. As we were crossing it, the car suddenly stopped. I looked at Tishan and asked him what he was doing. He quickly said it's not me, and even lifted his knee up to show me he was pressing the gas pedal. That's when I heard it. A strange sound, The tyres were spinning, but not really touching the ground. Then, the car slowly started lifting from the back. All of us looked out the rear window, but we couldn't see anything, just complete darkness. Suddenly, Tishan shouted in panic. Right after that, the back of the car dropped, hard. The whole vehicle jumped forward. We nearly crashed into a tree, but Tishan managed to get control again. We drove away as fast as we could. Very soon, the smell went away. We were back on a paved road. The radio worked again, but the whole mood felt wrong. I just turned it off. None of us said a word. We drove the rest of the way in silence. When we finally reached a gas station, we all got out, went to check the back of the Tahoe, and there it was, a huge dent right in the centre of the rear bumper. It covered almost the whole thing. Then, finally, Tishan broke the silence. He said, "I think I saw it." Shay answered right away, "I did too. I didn't see anything." But when I asked them what they saw, it was clear they didn't want to talk about it. Years later, I asked Tishan again. He told me, for just a second, he thought he saw something in the side mirror, something with hooves. Now I'm someone who doesn't really believe in things like that, but at the same time, I have no idea what could have been strong enough to lift the back of a Tahoe. I've told this story to a lot of people, and none of us have ever come up with a good logical explanation. Even thinking about something paranormal doesn't really make sense to me. I mean, if something could lift a Tahoe, why would it just let us go? Sometimes I wish I'd gotten out of the car just to see what it was. It's a question that stayed in my mind my whole life, and I still don't know the answer. In 2021, I was living in Spokane, Washington. I was 22 years old, working part-time at a coffee shop, barely making enough to pay rent. Most nights after work, I would sit on my bed, scrolling through Craigslist looking for quick jobs. Sometimes I found cleaning work or moving help, and sometimes pet sitting. But that night, one ad caught my eye. House sitting needed for 1 week. The post said small house, no pets, no cleaning required. It sounded too simple, but I didn't think too long. I called the number listed. A man picked up. He asked if I could come see the place the next afternoon. The following day I took a bus to the address he gave me. The man was already standing outside waiting. He looked about 60, maybe older. He introduced himself as Mr. Allen. He walked me through the house. The kitchen was small but clean. The living room had old furniture, a small TV, nothing expensive, nothing personal. The bedroom I would stay in was simple. A bed, a nightstand, a small window looking out at the empty backyard. After showing me around, he handed me a small folded piece of paper. I opened it thinking it was a list of rules, but there was only one line written in clear handwriting: "Do not pick up the phone after 3:02 a.m., no matter how many times it rings." I looked up confused. "Is this a joke?" I asked, trying to smile. But his face didn't change. He looked at me calmly and said, "It's important." I didn't ask any more. I didn't want to sound scared or stupid. That night I left a note on the kitchen table where I could see it from my room. The first night was normal. I made dinner, sat in the living room, watched some random TV show. Then I checked the doors, made sure everything was locked. The note was still on the table. I glanced at it a few times but didn't think much of it. The house was quiet. Too quiet maybe, but I was tired enough not to care. The second night felt the same. Nothing strange happened, but the third night was different. I woke up suddenly around 2:45 a.m, not because of a sound, but because the air felt colder, like I was standing outside without a jacket. I sat up in bed. My room was dark, but I could see a bit of light coming from the kitchen window. And then it started. The phone on the kitchen wall began to ring, loud, sharp. The kind of sound that didn't belong in a house like this. Not at that hour. I sat on my bed frozen, my mind completely blank for a few seconds. Then I remembered the note, the one rule Mr. Allen gave me. I stared at my door, knowing the kitchen was just a few steps away, but I didn't move. Minutes passed. 5, 10, 15. Then, silence. I waited a little longer, then slowly lay back down. I didn't sleep much. In the morning I sat in the kitchen staring at the phone. It looked normal now, like nothing happened, but I knew what I heard. I told myself I wouldn't stay another night, but I needed the money, and there were only 2 days left. That night I didn't turn off the lights. I stayed in bed wide awake. I kept checking the clock every few minutes. My heart was already racing as the time got closer to 3 a.m. And then it started again. The phone rang, but this time the sound felt different, like it was inside my head. Then it stopped, but before I could feel safe, it rang again, and without thinking I got up. I walked to the kitchen like something was pulling me. I picked up the phone. I didn't say anything, but I heard a voice. It was my grandmother's voice, soft, calm, just like when I was a child. But the words made my skin crawl. Why are you in my house? Why are you sleeping in my bed? I dropped the phone. The kitchen felt colder now, not just chilly, but the kind of cold that sinks into your bones. I didn't sleep that night. When morning came, I left the keys on the table. I didn't wait for payment. I didn't call Mr. Allen. I didn't care. I walked out, without looking back. I never found out who or what was on the other end of that phone, and I don't want to know. In 2019, I worked as a delivery driver for a restaurant, but I won't say which one. I had been doing delivery work for a while, and honestly I really enjoyed it. I'm a very outgoing person, so I loved driving around, meeting different people, having quick little chats when I dropped off their food. But not everything was perfect. Since I'm a girl and had to deliver in some rough parts of the city, I'd had a few creepy experiences. But I always thought I could handle myself. Nothing truly bad had ever happened, until one night. Something happened that I still think about to this day. I worked the night shift from 4:01 p.m. to 10:00 p.m. and around 8 hours that night a man placed an order. Nothing seemed strange at first. The directions were clear and I drove to his house without any trouble. But when I got there, something fell off right away. The house looked old, run down, like no one had lived there for years. I walked up to the door and knocked. After a few seconds, the door opened. The man stood there, but he didn't turn on any lights. He didn't say a single word. That's when I noticed the smell. It hit me like a wave, something foul, like rotting garbage, or something worse. Trying to stay polite, I held out the food and gave my usual line, "Here's your order. And could you please fill this out talking about the tip and signature on the receipt?" But he just stared at me. No smile. No words, not even a nod. He didn't reach for the food. He didn't touch the paper. He just stood there, in the dark, in silence, with that awful smell all around him. I didn't think too much about it and I drove back to the restaurant. But just as I got there, another order showed up, going to the exact same house. He had ordered the same food again. Now, maybe it was a mistake. Maybe he forgot he had already ordered. So I picked up the new order and drove back to his house. But everything was exactly the same. The house was still dark. No lights at all. That same awful smell was there again. And just like before, he didn't say a single word when I handed him the food. He didn't even look at me properly. This time, I started to feel uneasy. Something didn't feel right. But I just got back in my car and drove back to the store. When I got back, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Another order had come in for the exact same house. It was the third time now, and he had ordered the exact same thing again. I told my manager how strange it was. I said, "This is the third time tonight. Same house, same order, and the guy doesn't talk, doesn't turn on any lights. It feels off." But my manager just shrugged and said, "Maybe he's just hungry. Go ahead and take it." He didn't understand how creepy it felt. I didn't want to go, but I also didn't want to argue. So I grabbed the order, got in my car, and drove back to that dark house again. When I knocked, he opened the door just like the last 2 times. Still no lights, still that horrible smell. I tried to make a joke to lighten the mood. I said, "You know you can order more than 1 sandwich at a time, right?" But he didn't smile. He didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. He just stood there in silence. Then slowly closed the door again without saying a word. This time I walked back to my car much faster. Something about all of it felt too strange, like I was walking into something I didn't understand. I was really creeped out. I kind of ran back to my car as fast as I could. But before I drove off, I looked back at the house. That's when I noticed something different. One of the windows had a light on now, and in the window I saw someone standing there. I couldn't see their face or any clear features. It was just a shadowy figure. I guessed it was the same man who kept ordering, but I wasn't sure. Even now I still don't know who was standing there or why. Just as I was about to start my car, my phone started ringing. It was my manager calling from the store. I answered thinking he was just checking in, but his voice sounded different. He said another order just came through. Then he paused and said, "Listen, don't take it. Just leave. Something feels wrong. I think this might actually be dangerous." Now I knew I wasn't the only one who felt it. Right as the call ended, I looked up and I saw him. He was running toward my car from the house. For a second I couldn't move. I just sat there frozen. My brain was screaming at me to go, but my body wouldn't listen. He was yelling something, but I couldn't understand what he was saying. I finally snapped out of it and hit the gas. I drove away as fast as I could. Later that night, we blocked him from ordering again. He kept calling the store over and over, but we didn't answer. To this day, I still don't know what he really wanted, or what he was trying to do. When I was in college, I took a job delivering pizzas late at night. I usually worked until about 2 a.m., sometimes even later on the weekends. Honestly, the job wasn't very nice. The pizza shop was pretty gross dirty floors and everything seemed like it was falling apart, but the tips were usually really good and that made it worth it. At the time, I was 19 years old, female, and this all happened during the summertime in Colorado. Summers there get pretty hot during the day and even at night. Now remember that detail for later. It was only my second weekend working at this pizza place, so I was still getting familiar with everything. I was already kind of anxious and nervous by nature, especially about meeting strangers at night. So I kept things simple. My routine was to deliver the pizza as fast as possible, grab my tip and head straight to the next delivery. I almost never went inside a customer's house, and if I ever did, I made sure to just quickly step in and always kept the door wide open behind me. It felt safer that way. Then one night, close to midnight, I got an order to deliver pizza to a house on the east side of town. It was supposed to be my last delivery for the night. When I arrived, the house looked ordinary. Just a regular house with a small porch and a few lights on inside. The street itself was very dark. There weren't many street lights around. But I wasn't nervous or uncomfortable, at least not yet. I just wanted to finish my shift and go home. I parked my car along the street, grabbed the pizza box and walked up the short pathway to the front porch. After taking a quick glance around, I knocked on the door and waited for someone to answer. Then a shirtless older man with a big belly opened the door. He looked like he'd been drinking beer. Immediately I got a weird feeling from him. He told me to come inside, but I didn't want to. I said no politely and tried handing him the pizza from the doorway, but then he said, "Come inside, it's freezing out there. We don't want cold air getting in." That was strange to me because it was summer, and it definitely wasn't cold. But I got nervous, and without thinking clearly, I took one small step into his house. I still didn't fully enter. Then the man said again, "Come all the way inside. It's cold out there." I really should have left immediately, but I was feeling nervous and wasn't thinking straight. Without realizing what I was doing, I stepped further into his house, and he shut both the screen door and the main door behind me. I tried to calm myself down, telling myself I was probably just worrying too much. Then the man loudly yelled to his wife that the pizza was here. I could see his wife in the kitchen cooking something. That felt strange to me. Why would someone order pizza if they were already making dinner? I didn't understand. I looked around their living room and it was completely full of stuffed animals. They covered every surface. The couches, the tables, the windowsills, everywhere. Then the man's wife came out of the kitchen toward me. She was holding something in her hand, stretching it out toward me. As she got closer, I saw it was some kind of bread or cake. "Here, eat this banana bread," she said. "Don't worry, it's totally safe." Trying to stay polite, I quickly said, "No thank you," and told her I was on a diet. But she just stood there staring at me, her hand still stretched out, waiting for me to take the banana bread. I didn't take it. And suddenly, she became very upset. She started yelling at me loudly, insisting that I eat the bread. I said no again. But this time I wasn't trying to be polite anymore. I told both of them clearly that I had to leave right away and get back to work. I was still holding the pizza box, and all I could think about was getting out of there as quickly as possible, even if it meant running out the door. Finally, she stopped trying to make me eat the bread. She gave up, turned around and walked back into the kitchen. Then the man said to me, "Let me find some change for your tip." He started moving around the living room, digging through the couch cushions, lifting pillows, checking under the stuffed animals, trying to find coins or small bills. I quickly told him, "Don't worry about it, really, I don't need a tip, you can just take the pizza." But he ignored me. He kept insisting that he had to find some money to tip me. For the next several minutes he continued searching the room, opening drawers, looking under furniture. As time passed, I began to wonder if the whole thing was a trick. It felt like they were intentionally trying to keep me there, making excuses, trying to stop me from leaving. All I wanted was to get out. So finally I said in a firm voice, "I'm leaving now," and reached for the door handle. Seeing I was serious, the man grabbed the pizza box out of my hands and gave me a few quarters he'd managed to find. He still seemed annoyed, as if I had rushed him. But honestly, I didn't care about the tip anymore. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. The second I was outside, I practically ran back to my car, jumped in, locked all the doors, and drove away. I was shaking the whole drive back to the pizza shop. When I got there, I went straight to my supervisor and explained exactly what had just happened. But to my surprise, he didn't seem worried at all. He barely even listened. That made me feel even worse, like no one was taking my safety seriously. To this day, I still don't know if that couple was actually dangerous, or just really weird and socially awkward. But after that night, I never agreed to deliver pizzas to that house again. I always made sure someone else took that delivery. Last night, my husband and I were looking online for a local dispensary. We wanted to find one that offered a good deal for first-time patients. We came across a new website that showed a few nearby options, so we picked one and placed an order. The site said delivery would take about 45 to 60 minutes. That sounded fine to us. About 55 minutes later, my husband's phone rang. We figured it was the driver or someone from the dispensary, but instead the guy on the phone started acting really strange. At first he said a bunch of random numbers, just nonsense. Then he got aggressive. He told my husband that he knew exactly who he was. He said things like, "Don't mess with me," and started threatening us. He never said what he wanted exactly, but he made it clear that if we didn't give it to him, he would come find us. He said he would hurt us, that he wasn't someone to play with because he was crazy. We didn't know if it was someone from the dispensary playing a sick joke, or if it was some scammer who had somehow gotten our number. Right after the call, my husband told me everything, the strange behaviour, the threats, how the guy was saying weird things and throwing out random numbers. We were both confused and a little freaked out. So my husband decided to call the number back just to try and figure out what was going on. He tried calling twice. Both times it went straight to voicemail. But here's the weird part, the voicemails were different lengths, which made it seem like someone was watching the phone, maybe even hitting decline. Not long after the second call, the same number called us back. This time the guy sounded completely normal. He acted like nothing had happened earlier. It was almost like he was a totally different person. My husband told him about the call he'd received, the threats, the strange behaviour, all of it. The guy paused for a second, then said, "Yeah, we've been having some issues like that." He didn't explain what kind of issues, and his voice sounded a little shaky, like he was nervous or caught off guard. Then he asked if we had gotten our delivery yet. We told him we hadn't, so he said he would check on it. About 20 minutes later, we still hadn't heard anything. We tried calling again. Both calls were rejected. No one picked up. I was still watching through the blinds when I finally saw the delivery happen. My husband walked up to the car. They exchanged a few words. The driver handed him the bag. But then as my husband turned around to walk back to the house, I noticed something strange. The driver didn't leave. He stared at my husband the entire time. His car had already started to move, but then he stopped right in the middle of the street just to keep watching him. I immediately stepped out onto the porch as my husband was walking back. Before I could even say anything, he said, "That was the guy from the phone call, I'm sure of it. He told me he could feel the man's eyes on him, like the driver wanted him to know who he was." My husband even turned around to look back at the car before it finally drove off, just to make sure he wasn't imagining it. Then we saw the man's car back up the way he had come, and at the same time a security truck started driving toward him. After that, both of them left the apartment complex. We stayed out on the porch. I was still nervous, scared he might come back. I even thought about writing a review to warn others, just to say the whole thing felt sketchy, but I decided not to, just in case it made things worse or brought more trouble. Then after a while he came back. We were still sitting on the porch when we saw his car return. He slowed down, almost to a full stop, right in front of us. His headlights lit us up completely like a spotlight. It was so intense we could barely see past the glare. We just sat there, frozen, watching him, unsure what he was going to do next. But instead of leaving or saying anything, he slowly drove off toward another building in the complex. We thought maybe he had another delivery, but then things got strange again. He parked for a moment, then started moving his car back and forth like he was changing his mind or trying to decide something. He backed up, pulled forward, paused, turned, and did it all over again right in the middle of the road. There were long moments where his car just sat there not moving, like he was watching or thinking. Finally, he drove past us again, but this time he didn't look at us at all. Not even a quick glance. He just kept his eyes straight ahead and drove by like nothing happened. We stayed outside for a few more minutes just to be sure, but we never saw him again. What makes me feel even more uneasy is that he has our phone number and our address, and to be honest, I don't really believe the story he gave us at the end. Something about it just didn't feel right.